How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Noah Diver, and I am back once again with another NHL all-season video. In this video, I'm going to be discussing what I would say is the biggest move of the NHL offseason so far, the Matt Tkachuk, Jonathan Huberdeau trade that took place last night. There were some big moves in free agency, some decent trades as well, but I think this is an absolute blockbuster with two elite players finding new teams for next season. But real quick, before I get too in depth into the trade details, going through all the player stats and whatnot, and the cap situations for both the Florida Panthers and Calgary Flames, just want to give a quick shout out to our YouTube channel at Review and Preview Sports. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoy our content, share it around on any pages that you want, and obviously hit that big red button and subscribe if you do enjoy our content. We also have other social medias such as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have a TikTok as well, Anchor, which is where, we post our Review and Preview podcasts. So I'll just leave that ticker up there real quick. If you guys do want to check any of that out. But like I said, big trade here. I'm going to put up the trade details in a second because it is absolutely insane trade. So on July 22nd, 2022, 2 days after informing the Flames that Matt Tkachuk did not want to re-sign, which, I said that I thought they didn't sign Gaudreau because they wanted to build around Tkachuk as their franchise guy. What do I know? 2 days later, he says he's not re-signing. And then a couple days after that, he's traded. They trade him to the Florida Panthers along with a conditional fourth in 2025 in exchange for winger Jonathan Huberdeau, defenseman MacKenzie Weegar, Cole Schwent, who is a prospect, and a lottery-protected first-round pick in 2025. So, if for whatever reason they miss the playoffs, they're not going to get lucky, win the lottery, and have a number one pick. So there is that. And he also signed an 8-year, $76 million contract, which is a $9.5 million AAV after being traded. So first, I'm going to get into the Matthew Tkachuk side of this trade, and I will put his stats up and let you guys know what I think of him. I do love both Tkachuk and Huberdeau. They're two of my favorite players in the entire league. And last year, both guys were elite. Now, I do think the biggest decider in this trade is that Tkachuk is about 4.5 years younger than Huberdeau. Huberdeau turned 29 about a month and a half ago, whereas Tkachuk turns 25 in December. He was a 6th overall pick back in the 2016 NHL entry draft. Huberdeau was a 3rd overall pick back in 2011. And last season, Tkachuk had a phenomenal year, definitely a career, 42 goals and 62 assists for 104 points, which was good for 8th highest in the NHL last year, plus minus of 57, which was a top 3 mark in the NHL. For reference, the league leader last year was Johnny Gaudreau, who was also in the Flames at a plus 64. 13.7 puck shares, which was once again, puck shares is basically hockey references version of what WAR is for baseball. Just trying to calculate how good, how valuable you are for your team that season. 13.7 is an absolutely ridiculous number. It's an elite level, definitely, top 10 level for the league last season. 6 game-winning goals as well, almost 18 minutes time on ice. He hits as well, 93 hits last year, over 100 hits the 3 years before that. He blocked shots at a decent rate. He does give away the puck a good bit, but he's also a winger. They're responsible for, a lot of breakup passes as well, dumping the puck in and getting on the forecheck and stuff. They turn the puck over at a decent rate. So I don't think that's anything to do with shortcomings on his part. I think it's just the nature of his position. And if I go to his advanced stats real quick, actually, I believe it's under here. What I love about Tkachuk is that he's great defensive. Like I said, if we look at this point shares category right here, offensive puck shares, he had 10.1 last year, which is a phenomenal mark, but 3.5 defensive puck shares last year, which, considering his career high, for the rest of his career was his rookie year 1.9. I think he took a big step defensively last year as well to kind of add to his game, and he's always had that that offensive talent, as you will. But if he can get his defense game, continue to develop that. If you look at possession quality, expected goals for and expected goals against, basically how many goals can you account for on your team and how many goals against do you account for on your team? It's basically like defensive runs saved. If you're familiar with defensive metrics in baseball, how many goals do you count for with your play? How many goals expected can the team expect to score with you on the ice? And how many goals against can they expect when you're on the ice? And last season, a plus minus of 28.8. His career high before that was 12.8. Like I said, he contributed massively to Calgary's surprising season last year. I mean, they won the division. I think a lot of people thought either Edmonton or Vegas will win their division. I was more on the Vegas train after they traded for Jack Eichel. That has at least so far not worked out for him because he barely played last year. They missed the playoffs. Most disappointing team in the league. But Calgary, I think overachieved a bit winning the division. And honestly, once they got to the playoffs, I thought they could go to the conference finals because I thought they had a pretty easy road with Dallas and Edmonton. But Edmonton with McDavid and Draisaitl, I mean, they just could not stop them from scoring at all. So they did lose in the second round, but I think Calgary will be good for quite a few more years to come in that division. I think, the teams of the future are teams like the Kings and the Ducks. I think a few years from now, they'll definitely be the teams running that division, year after year. But for now, I think Calgary will still be right in contention. And what helps them is that they got Jonathan Huberdeau back, who in his own right is also an elite player. 115 points last year, 30 goals, 85 assists. 115 points was second in the entire NHL last year, behind only Connor McDavid, who is the best hockey player in the world. Plus minus of 35, 11.9 puck shares, 7 game-winning goals last year. He is also a winger like Tkachuk, so he kind of fills the void. But last season, Huberdeau did have 99 hits last year, which was a big step up, actually. I think he's starting to, kind of add a bit of a physicality to his game last season. 28 blocks, 63 takeaways to 85 giveaways, which I think for a winger, to have 63 takeaways is very impressive. And if I go to his advanced stats, I mean, once again, this is a guy that contributes positively to his team, 15.1 plus minus for expected goals last season. So he was contributing really well to his team, 62.3 expected goals for, which is an absolutely phenomenal rate. He also did have 11.9 puck shares. Like I said, 2.3 of those are defensive. So, an elite guy, I mean, 85 assists is just absolutely incredible. So yeah, and 115 points, like I said, was second best in the league. Now, real quick, I do want to get into the other players involved in this trade. I will very quickly mention, before I get into Weegar, I will mention Cole Schwent. He is a prospect. This is from last December, I believe it was, in the AHL. He was Rookie of the Month. 8 games played, 2 goals, 8 assists for 10 points. He's only played 3 NHL games. So, I mean, he's still only 21. He's definitely a prospect. He was a third-round pick of the Florida Panthers back in 2019. So, we'll see how he works out, and we'll see that first rounder as well. It is lottery protected, so it's probably, especially if Florida's going to be a good team, which I would expect they would be, it'll be later first round, basically a second round pick, maybe even. So, but I mean, you never know. You can always hit on later picks. I mean, we've seen 7th round NHL players, undrafted NHL players, have very good careers. So, it'll be interesting to see how that works out. And, like I said, Tkachuk and Huberdeau are definitely the main pieces. But I do want to, give a shout out to MacKenzie Weegar because I think he's a good player as well. So I'll put up his stats real quick. I was definitely surprised they threw in Weegar. I thought they might try and keep him, but evidently they did not. So let me just remove this real quick, and I'll get into his stats. Weegar was phenomenal last season. He really was. 44 points in 80 games, 8 goals, 36 assists. 44 points, very solid mark for a defenseman. I think if you're hitting 50 and above, you're one of the top tier offensive defensemen in the league, and he had 44 last year, plus minus of 40, 7.7 puck shares. He also added 2 game-winning goals. But what I love about Weegar, he throws the body. He's an absolutely physical defenseman, 179 hits, but even more than that, look how many shots he blocks. 156 block shots. For reference, his career high before that was back in 2018, 2019 when he had 103. How much pressure it takes off your goaltender and helps your defense if a guy out there is blocking shots at that high of a rate is just absolutely insane. He also takes away the puck at a good rate. 74 takeaways to 85 giveaways, which for a defenseman who, like I mentioned in a Chris Letang video a while ago, because since they're responsible for most breakout passes and whatnot, they do turn the puck over a good bit. So the fact those numbers are almost even is actually pretty insane for a defenseman. And the main thing that I love about Weegar, 44 points, he's not an offensive first defenseman. If he gives you 45 points a season, great. That's just a bonus. What he's phenomenal at is defensively. 5.0 defensive puck shares last year, 4.4 the year before that. So he's starting to develop, and he's showing that, him being that great defensively was really no fluke. He was phenomenal for them last season. Expected goals for 88.8 to only 60.6 goals against, 28.2 expected plus minus. So, like I said, this guy is just a very sound defensively. He blocks shots, he hits, any offense he adds is a bonus. I think if Calgary gets a guy next season, who is hitting 45, 50 points, that's just a bonus for them. So real quick before I do get off, I do want to get into the cap situation for both teams. First, I'll start with the Calgary Flames because they did definitely get a lot more players back since Florida basically just got Matt Tkachuk. But yeah, the Calgary Flames do have 9.3 cap space for this season, but that doesn't matter. We're looking at next season because this year they only have Andrew Mangiapane and Oliver Shillington still as RFAs. I expect both those guys to be re-signed very soon, or at least tendered, and maybe they'll get some draft picks. But we need to look at next season because I think the thing that a lot of people need to remember, saying that oh, Florida got fleeced in his trade, they traded Huberdeau and Weegar, but the key thing for Calgary is they need to re-sign these guys. Huberdeau is a UFA after next year, as is Weegar. They also have other guys like mainly on the defensive core, Yusuf Valimaki, who's a prospect for them. They'll need to re-sign him as well. Dart Vlader, that as people love to call him, Daniel Vlader. We'll see what they do with him as well. But the key thing for Calgary is they have cap space for next season. If we look at this number real quick, $36 million that I've highlighted right there, that is their projected cap space for next year. The cap is also going up $1 million from 82.5 to 83.5. So they have plenty of cap space to sign these guys. I think Huberdeau, he probably demands 11, let's say around 11 million. Weegar 5 or 6 million maybe. He's definitely going to get a big increase from that 3.25 million mark that he is getting. So I think they have enough room to sign these guys, and I think they will because they didn't just trade for these guys to be rentals. They want these guys to be building blocks of the team for next years. And these guys aren't old by any means. Huberdeau's still only 29. He just turned that, like I said, about a month and a half ago. And Weegar's 28. So, even if they get 7 or 8 year deals, excuse me. I mean, they'll take them to their mid 30s, which isn't terrible. I mean, it's not like, a certain team that gave Chris Letang a contract until he's 41 or anything like that. But I think they'll be able to re-sign these guys, and I think that was their thinking as well. Get guys back that are, very good, or in Huberdeau's case, I think elite players in their own right, for a guy that didn't even want to sign there as an RFA. And so I think Calgary did make out well in this trade. For whatever reason, if they do lose Huberdeau or Weegar, if they want to test the market next year or whatever happens, that definitely hurts the evaluation of the trade a lot more in my mind. But I do think they got a good bit back. They got, two very solid roster players. They got a prospect, and they got a first-round pick. So lottery protected, like I said. So, there will be no, getting lucky and picking number one overall. But if Florida somehow misses the playoffs in 2024-25, but you never know. You can always hit on a draft pick in the first round. So now for the Florida Panthers, like I mentioned in a previous video about Florida, they were in cap hell. They had basically no cap space at all, and they needed Huberdeau and Weegar were coming up after next year. And if we look at the cap space, even for this year, minus 3.3 million in the hole for them, 85.8 projected cap hit for them. But the key thing is, now that they re-signed Matthew Tkachuk, which, like I said, not confirmed like it says there, subject to change, but from what we're hearing, 8 years, $76 million, 9.5 million AAV. For a guy that's only 24, I mean, it only takes him until he's 31, 32, whatever it is. It's a good deal. I think, like I said, this is a guy that was a top 10 player in the league last year, and he's only going to get better. He's great defensively. And he's, starting to come into his own offensively as an elite, goal scoring, 40 goal scorer, 100-plus point guy. That's incredibly valuable. So for 9.5 million, I mean, I know guys that produce worse numbers than that make 11, 12 million. So, John Tavares mainly, I'm looking at you. But I think it's a good deal, especially for how young he is. The key thing for them is they do have guys coming up after next year, and they don't have as much cap flexibility as a team like the Flames does. If we look at this, 15.8 million cap space projected for next offseason. And like I said, if you're thinking Huberdeau gets 10, 11 million, Weegar gets 5 or 6, well, you can't afford both those guys. And then you got to think, do they want to keep any other guys? Colin White is an RFA, Balsers on the defensive end as well. They have some guys coming up. No one major. They will have to give Spencer Knight a contract. We'll see if he actually plays a good level this year and gets a decent contract, or if he just gets, a bridge deal. But I think their thinking was they couldn't re-sign both of them, and they probably knew both of them didn't really want to re-sign there, or they would at least test free agency, and you run the risk of losing them for nothing. So for both sides, I think it's a fairly even trade. I know a lot of people want to say that Florida got fleeced, but they did get back a 24-year-old winger who was an elite player last season. They signed him to what I think is a pretty good contract for someone that young and that production level. If he can replicate it, that's even better. But even if he's like an 85, 90 point guy consistently, for that contract he's getting, like I said, I mean, I know guys like who make way more than that don't produce at that level and are way older. So the contract isn't that bad. On the Calgary side, if they re-sign both Huberdeau and Weegar, I think it's a great deal for them. I think, getting a prospect back and close to win a first-round pick helps as well. So for me, if I had to pick a winner right now, I would go with the Calgary Flames. Assuming that they re-sign both those players, I think they got two very good players back that'll help them continue to contend for the next few years. And, they have a prospect and a first-round pick to deal with, so, they're going to add to their future as well. Whereas for Florida, with deals like this, a deal like renting Claude Giroux, they've traded like three of their next first round picks in the next 3 years, something like that. And, they got back Matthew Tkachuk, which I think he's a fantastic player. But I just think they've lost a lot in building for their future. And if you ask me if next season I think Florida will win the Stanley Cup, unfortunately, I'd have to say no because, while they were a President's Trophy winning team this year, they did get swept by the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, I will say Tampa Bay did get swept back in 2019 when they had the best record in NHL history, and look at them now. So it's not a given by any means, but if I had to predict right here, right now, I would not expect Florida to win a Stanley Cup in the next few years. But, clip this, and if I'm wrong, make fun of me. I'm wrong all the time. We'll see what happens. It's just tough, man. It's tough for Florida. That Atlantic division, with teams like Toronto, Tampa Bay, you know, even Boston, they can have a good season here and now, and young up and coming teams like Ottawa and Detroit. That division is absolutely murder. So we'll see what happens. I think Calgary is right now in a better spot than Florida is, if they can re-sign Huberdeau and Weegar, like I said. So pretty much an even trade in my mind. I think saying stuff like, "Oh, Florida got fleeced," I think that's a bit too far because I don't think either of those guys, at the very least, I think they would have tested free agency when you risk losing him for nothing. At least they got back an elite 24-year-old player and signed him to a reasonable contract. So, really long video, definitely the longest I've done, but it deserves it. Like I said, this was an absolutely massive deal. Two elite players with new teams next year. We'll see how they both do. I like them both a lot. I think they'll both do fantastically well for their teams. And I think both teams will be right in the mix for playoff contention. And, we'll see if both can go farther. Florida's never won a Stanley Cup. Calgary hasn't won since 1989, I believe it is. So, it'd be interesting to see one of those teams go on a run. So, from myself, Noah Dibler, and all the crew at Review and Preview, this has been me reviewing the Matthew Tkachuk, Jonathan Huberdeau trade. I think it's a slight win for Calgary, unless they don't re-sign any of those guys, then I think it's pretty much a draw or even a win for Florida. So thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time when some more major news breaks out.